All right, welcome to This Explainer. Today we're going to channel our inner detective to systematically crack the case of sick and dying plants. Look, if you've ever walked into your yard and found a prized shrub suddenly dropping its leaves or just kind of looking a bit worse for wear, you absolutely know that sinking feeling. It's incredibly frustrating, right? You pour all this time and money into a garden only to watch your hard work wither away while you end up wasting cash on the completely wrong fertilizers or treatments. But don't worry, today we're giving you the exact, structured tools the pros use to completely stop the guesswork and figure out exactly what's going wrong.
Because honestly, we have all been there. You're staring at a shriveled leaf, just wondering who killed the tomato plant. But before you panic at our botanical crime scene, let's just stop for a second and establish a really methodical approach to plant diagnostics. Because guessing doesn't work in detective work, and indiscriminately spraying chemicals for sure doesn't work in horticulture.
Okay, step one, identify the victim.
Let's dive right into this, because this is absolutely crucial. You cannot solve the mystery if you don't first identify the exact plant species and its baseline health. This is literally the core of all plant diagnostics. In fact, this advice from the NC State Extension is our golden rule. We have to identify the host plant to even begin to understand what might be attacking it. So why does this matter so much? Well, different plants have completely different baseline immunities and weaknesses. A disease that totally wipes out a cucumber plant might not even leave a scratch on a pepper plant sitting right next to it. You can't possibly know if a plant is acting sick if you don't know what it looks like when it's perfectly healthy. So your very first step is always identifying your plant species.
It's really fascinating when you look at the striking difference between a natural plant trait and actual distress. Perfectly healthy traits can so easily be mistaken for a sick plant if you haven't identified the species first. For example, a healthy Russian olive naturally has these gorgeous silvery stems and leaves, but if you didn't know that was its baseline, you might think the poor thing is covered in mildew. Or take the Japanese ukuba. It naturally has these bright yellow spots on its leaves as part of its natural variegation. If you don't know your plant species, you might completely misdiagnose its natural beauty as some severe viral infection and then try to treat a disease that simply isn't even there.
Moving on to step 2, the usual suspects. Now that we know who our victim is and what they're actually supposed to look like, it's time to figure out what might be attacking them. We can categorize our culprits using what the Collin County Master Gardeners call the disease circle. This basically splits them into living attackers versus non-living stressors. And this distinction is a massive deal because the treatment for a living bug is entirely different from the treatment for, say, bad soil. On the biotic side, we've got living organisms, fungi, bacteria, insects, nematodes, things that actively infect or feed on the plant tissue. On the abiotic side, we have non-living environmental factors. We're talking drought, poor drainage, nutrient imbalances, frost, or even just physical damage. Honestly, sometimes a wilting plant doesn't have a disease at all. It just had a really unfortunate run-in with a weed whacker that damaged its main stem. And this right here brilliantly illustrates that your problem isn't always some microscopic disease or a super complex fungal infection. Sometimes it's just a hungry neighbor caught red-handed. Herbivores are very much a part of that biotic living side of the disease circle. So the really crucial takeaway here is to always investigate those non-living abiotic stressors first, long before you assume your plant got some contagious infection. Why? Well, because abiotic issues account for a massive percentage of all plant problems. It's a hugely high-yield step for you as the home detective. Plus, they're usually way easier to correct. Adjusting your watering schedule or fixing some soil drainage doesn't require unnecessary chemical treatments. So always check the environment first.
All right, step 3, examining the evidence.
Let's start looking at the actual physical evidence left behind. Because in the plant world, we have to really carefully distinguish between symptoms and signs. We'll start with symptoms. A symptom is simply how the victim is reacting to the stress. It is not the attacker itself. Think of a symptom kind of like a fever or a cough in a human. It tells you the body is fighting something off, sure, but it doesn't definitively tell you if it's a cold, the flu, or just allergies. If you see leaves curling, stems turning yellow, or general stunting of growth, you are basically looking at the plant's internal alarm system going off.
For instance, check out this harsh copper coloring on the needles of the Alberta spruce. This is called bronzing. Now, this symptom could point to biotic damage from spider mites, but actually, it could also be an abiotic issue like ozone injury or winter burn. The symptom tells us the plant is stressed out, but it doesn't definitively name the killer.
Another truly fascinating symptom is called epinasty. This is a highly specific, totally abnormal contortion where the leaves curve violently downward. And the reason it looks so incredibly alien is because the cells on the upper side of the leaf are literally growing faster than the cells on the bottom side, which forces that weird downward curl. It looks super alarming and is very often caused by exposure to herbicides or certain plant viruses.
Just look at how an abiotic chemical drift contorts two entirely different plant species. You've got a tomato plant twisted by epinasty, and right next to it, a pear tree suffering from dicamba drift, which is what happens when weed killer used on a nearby lawn gets carried by the wind straight onto your prized garden. This just proves, yet again, why identifying your plant species and knowing its normal baseline is so critical. If you don't know what the normal growth habit of that specific pear tree branch is, you might not catch the subtle curling symptom early enough to do anything about it.
Now, unlike a symptom, a sign means you have found the physical presence of the perpetrator itself right there at the scene of the crime. You weren't just looking at the plant's reaction anymore. To continue our medical analogy from earlier, if a symptom is the fever, the sign is finding the actual bacteria under a microscope. You are looking directly at the culprit or the physical trace it left behind.
These right here are clear-cut signs. You see the white, fluffy mycelia, those fungal threads of mold creeping along the stem, and then the undeniable presence of Colorado potato beetles literally caught red-handed munching away. Finding a sign is the botanical equivalent of finding fingerprints or finding the actual suspect just standing there in your garden. Molted insect skins, webs, actual fungal spores, these are all definitive signs.
So, let's talk about cracking the case.
We have gathered our evidence, so let's establish a standard protocol to solve literally any botanical mystery you encounter in your own backyard. If you methodically follow these steps, I promise you will save time, money, and totally unnecessary chemical treatments. Notice that step 1, identify the plant species, is the absolute linchpin of the entire operation. I can't say it enough. Without knowing the victim, steps 2 and 3 are completely useless. Identify the plant to know its normal state. Then, rule out those easy-to-fix abiotic stressors like water and soil issues. And finally, closely investigate the plant for both its reactions, the symptoms, and any physical intruders, the signs. But hey, what happens when you've analyzed the symptoms, you've checked for signs, you've assessed the environment, and you're still just completely stumped? Don't worry about it. Even the absolute best detectives sometimes run into a cold case. When the trail goes cold, you need to treat your local cooperative extension center like your own personal crime lab. You bag your evidence by carefully taking plant samples. You document the scene by taking clear photographs, and pro tip here, take photos of the whole plant and the soil around it, not just one single damaged leaf. Then, you bring your findings to the master gardeners. They have the actual lab equipment and the localized expertise to help you definitively close the case. So, armed with these structural diagnostic tools, knowing the difference between a sign and a symptom, understanding the disease circle, and above all else, the absolute necessity of identifying your plant species first, I really encourage you to just step outside, observe your plants closely. The next time you walk past a wilting plant, stop and ask yourself, do I actually know its name? What botanical mysteries are hiding right there in your own backyard, just waiting for you to identify the victim? Keep learning, keep exploring, and we'll see you in the next explainer.